Hey, welcome. Today, we're going to dig into a really big question, one that pretty much defines how we live together, how we treat each other, and frankly, what kind of future we're building.
It sounds simple, right? But that line between what you can do and what you should do, well, it can get really blurry really fast. Think of it like this. The law gives you the rules of the road, but ethics? That's your moral compass telling you where you ought to go. So let's get into it.
So here's our game plan. We're going to start with the basics. What even is the difference between law and ethics? Then we'll see how that plays out in something super personal, consent. After that, we'll scale way up to the societal level with the ethics of AI. Look at what happens when our legal systems don't quite get it right, and then we'll pull it all together.
All right, first things first. Before we can really get into the debate, we have to be on the same page. We've got to define our terms. What are we actually talking about when we say law versus ethics?
This breaks it down perfectly. So, on one side, you've got the law. It's a formal system of rules, right? The government enforces it, and it's all about keeping society in order. If you break the law, the consequences are external, fines, maybe even jail time. But then you have ethics. That's a whole different ballgame. It's about a set of moral principles that are guided by our own values. The goal isn't just order, it's what the ancient Greeks like Aristotle called eudaimonia, basically human flourishing. And the consequences, they're internal. Guilt, shame, knowing you didn't do the right thing.
And this quote from Aristotle just nails it. Ethics isn't about one big heroic act. It's about the small things we do over and over again. It's about building character, making excellence a habit. It's an inside job, not just about following some rule book.
Okay, so that's the big picture theory. Now let's bring it down to something deeply personal: consent. This is a perfect example of where just meeting the bare minimum legal standard isn't enough. You need a much higher ethical standard.
A great way to think about this ethically is the FRIES model for what we call affirmative consent. It's super clear. Consent has to be freely given, no pressure. It's got to be reversible, meaning you can change your mind anytime. It has to be informed, so you actually know what you're agreeing to. It should be enthusiastic. You should only do things you actually want to do. And finally, it has to be specific. Saying yes to a cup of coffee doesn't mean you've said yes to anything else. See? This is all about communication and respect, which goes way beyond just checking a legal box.
And hey, this isn't just some abstract idea. The data shows this is catching on. According to a 2023 CDC survey, almost 80% of high schoolers who've had sexual contact said they actually asked for verbal consent the last time. That shows a real shift towards these ethical norms.
But here's where it gets interesting. When you break down that data, you see a pretty noticeable gap. About 85% of male students said they asked for consent, but only about 75% of female students did. Now, the CDC thinks this might have to do with old-school social scripts, where guys are sort of expected to be the ones to initiate things. It's just a fascinating peek into how our own ethical behavior can be shaped by these big external cultural ideas.
Okay, so we've looked at the personal. Now let's zoom all the way out. We're going to take that exact same law versus ethics idea and apply it to one of the biggest, most powerful technologies out there right now.
Yep, let's talk about AI. Because if consent is about ethics in our one-on-one interactions, AI is where we have to figure out ethics on a global scale, and often in a space where the law just hasn't caught up yet.
The ethical minefields here are just massive. And a big reason for that is that these AIs learn from, us, from the entire internet, which is messy and full of bias. So what happens? You end up with these huge questions about built-in bias, really convincing misinformation, copyright battles, and maybe the biggest one of all: who is actually responsible when an AI makes a mistake or causes real harm? This table really lays out that can versus should problem perfectly. Look, an AI company can legally train its model on copyrighted art scraped from the web. It's a legal gray area right now. But should they, when you think about being fair to the artists? You can create a deepfake video. That's legal in a lot of cases. But should you, knowing how it could be used to spread lies? A business can automate a bunch of entry-level jobs. But should it, when that pulls the rug out from under the next generation of workers? This is exactly where that ethical compass is so critical.
So we've seen how ethics are vital when the law is playing catch-up, like with AI. But what happens when the legal system we already have isn't actually helping people, or fixing the harm that's been done? Well, sometimes you have to look for a whole new way of doing things, one that's built on ethics from the ground up. And one of those models is called restorative justice. Instead of asking what law was broken and what's the punishment, it asks totally different questions. Who was harmed? What do they need, and who has the responsibility to fix this? It's all about healing and real accountability, not just punishment. It's about giving survivors a voice and giving the person who caused the harm a chance to actually make things right. And the difference is just huge. The regular criminal legal system focuses on the person who broke the rule, and the goal is punishment. But that often doesn't actually help the survivor or reduce future harm. Restorative justice flips the whole thing on its head. It puts the survivor and the community at the center, and the goal is healing and true accountability. It's a system designed to get to an ethical outcome, repairing the damage, not just a legal one.
So, we've gone from the core ideas of law and ethics all the way to how they affect our relationships, our technology, and even our justice system. So, where does that leave us? What's next?
Let's recap the big ideas here. First, remember that the law is the floor. It's the bare minimum. Ethics is the compass that helps us figure out what to do in the world above that floor. Second, this isn't just abstract stuff. It applies to everything, from our bedrooms to the boardrooms building AI. Third, we're seeing these amazing new models like affirmative consent and restorative justice that are trying to line our systems up with our actual values. And finally, the common thread through all of this, human judgment and human accountability. That's more important than ever.
Because at the end of the day, it really all comes down to this one question. As the world gets more complicated, as our tools get more powerful, the responsibility on each and every one of us gets bigger. It's not enough anymore to just ask if you're allowed to do something. The real question, the one we all have to answer for ourselves, is whether it's the right thing to do.